Good morning and welcome to our latest chat with a professional who is coming on board to help you and your child with an issue that's really relevant in their lives. And today I'm going to be talking with Nonie Carr, who's a psychologist and a colleague who one of her areas of interest is performance anxiety, and both as an athlete and as a musician who went through having to do VCE performance exams, which are a pretty scary thing to have to do. So Nonie is going to be joining us very shortly on the page. So we'll just wait for her to come and join us. So if you're watching this later and you have friends who you think would be interested, by all means, please share this with them. Because the whole point is to try and get information that is helpful and as practical as possible. So I'm just going to invite Nonie to come and join us now. While we're waiting for her, if you have any questions that pop up while you're watching or later, please put them down underneath and we will be happy to answer. Hello, Nonie.
Hi there.
How are you?
How you doing?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Doing well.
I'm just looking for something on my computer, so it's sitting there waiting for me.
So, thank you for taking the time to come and have a chat with us about performance anxiety in VCE, because it's a very real thing and we can feel that the peak is just coming and coming. So, but perhaps if you can tell people a little bit about your background in the performance anxiety stage.
Yeah. So, where do I start? Well, I took up cycling as an adult, and yes, like I cycled as a kid, but I took up cycling more seriously as an adult, and then moved into competing, and racing, which was a lot of fun. But then when I started winning and started to get a little bit competitive, I've always had that competitive streak. But then I started, that there's always that performance anxiety in competition. And then, so that's something that I have experienced myself, and I've worked on myself. I have actually consulted with a sports psych myself for my own issues around wanting to perform at my best, which is, most athletes now do. People at that more elite level, a lot higher than me, do tend to consult with psychologists to assist with their performance. But I've also worked with adults who are performers, not a huge number, but a few who are performers are wanting to manage their performance anxiety. And myself as an adolescent, I did, when I did my VCE, I did music craft, which I think it's changed the title of the subject now, but I did the solo performance stream.
I think it's just called music performance.
Flute.
Music performance, yeah.
Yeah. So I played flute, and I learned flute from, right through my secondary schooling, and performed, in the school ensembles, and did all the AMEB exams up to grade 5, and obviously had to do a performance exam for music. And I also thought I was doing music, so why not audition for the conservatorium?
While you're at it.
While I'm at it. But it was actually to get into music therapy.
Okay.
So at that time I thought, why not? I wasn't doing psychology at school because it wasn't offered at my school. But I did audition, and I didn't do as well as I would have liked to. but there was, you know, a number of factors linked to that around not so much my performance anxiety, more about my diligence to practicing.
Right. And there are strategies to help with that as well. But yes.
Oh yes, there are. So yeah, that's a little bit of my history around performance.
So like
I also did all the school musicals too,
yes.
and performed. I was in a children's choir, and I performed in the choir in ensemble. So yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've watched over the a few years the rehearsals and the shows that the students who are in music performance do for the audience as part of their leading up to their exams. And you know, it's quite challenging. The singers and the musicians need to be out there without microphones, make themselves be heard, and the spotlight is just, you know, totally on them, which is quite different from doing a musical or a choir or a band. It's very intense.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, and I suppose that's what we're here to talk about a little bit today. I mean, you know, it is quite an intense period of time. So what are some of the ways that you would recommend students go about managing that type of anxiety?
I think to start with, those who have chosen to do one of these subjects, whether it's music performance or dance,
drama,
or drama, they have chosen these subjects because they love doing it. They've always done it. They get great joy out of performing. So it's not just around I can sing or I can play an instrument or I can dance or I can act. It's that sense of joy or happiness or pleasure with actually engaging in that skill. So it's not necessarily about sometimes it's about that joy you get performing and seeing how the audience reacts. Those students are less likely to struggle too much with performance anxiety.
You think that's an interesting observation. Yes.
In terms of the point where it prevents them performing. So it's not that they're going to not struggle with it. It's that their focus is different. Okay. So I think when you walk on stage, for want of a better term, because it's not always a stage where you're doing these performances, it's about that, how you feel in that moment and where your attention is. And so most of these students who are choosing to do these subjects, they have a passion about it. So it means something to them. It has value. It's that real, but they also have those goals and expectations about themselves, which to some extent are built up by those around them. So, you know, friends or family or teachers keep telling them, you've got this talent, you can do this, you're fantastic, you're this, you're that, whatever. And then they walk out and expect to be the best. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But then you couple that with that fear of disappointing others, that fear of failure. And then you get focused on that possibility rather than the possibility of, I can do this and it's going to feel good.
So the people so the children or the students who have chosen to do this, not so they didn't have to do science or geography, but because it's their passion and it's
Yep.
what they live for and love.
Yep.
They're like, whatever anxiety they have enough motivation to get out there and overcome that little bit of anxiety. But
sometimes there's a shift. There is, they might have that passion because they love this. They've chosen to do it because this is what they feel good doing. But there's still that dissonance, I suppose, or that gap between where they want to perform and where they fear they might fail.
So that's the next level, because when we're looking at performance anxiety, we have performance anxiety that actually stops the students from getting out there on the stage.
Yes.
I think what you're focusing on right now is they've got out there, but it's these underlying, anxious thoughts in their head that are going to stop them from performing their best.
Yeah, absolutely. So we get caught up on that stage, or even before you get to that point of walking out or stepping up into that performance space, we get caught up in the what if. Oh my God, I'm not going to do. I can't do this. I can't do this. And then we get caught up in those physiological symptoms of anxiety. So, for those watching, if they don't know, standard anxiety symptoms, it's that the breathing out of control, the heart racing, the pins and needles maybe, or the tingling, the shaking, feeling hot, sweaty palms, feeling sick, or butterflies, nausea, the tenseness. We put all of that in a singer or in a violinist or a flautist or a pianist or a dancer or an actor. And, those on woodwind or brass instruments and singers need their
breath,
voice and their diaphragm if they do. Yeah, they need to breathe. Dancers need that looseness in their body rather than the shoulder, up here. Actors, even those performing in drama, need that freedom in their body, that breath control. So when we have all and if you've got sweaty palms, I'll try to hold an instrument, a flute or a violin or even a brass. It gets, it can be slippery. So when we start noticing these symptoms, and we start worrying about these symptoms. Even that process, that idea of, can I even do this given I can't breathe, my heart's racing, and I can't even hold my instrument, firmly, then, all of a sudden our focus has completely shifted from what we want to do to what our body's doing, and we're thinking our body's betraying us.
So it's very much important in this that we learn and we understand what our body's doing. So we don't start that worry cycle that we're worrying about our symptoms, and therefore that just makes it worse. So,
yeah, absolutely. Because if you go, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this. Oh, now I can't breathe. Oh, now I definitely can't sing, and I definitely can't, get enough breath in to hold that note for as long as I might need to, or sing as loud as I need to, because there's a lot of diaphragm control needed to get your voice to the back of a room without a mic.
Oh, totally. Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Yep. Or to hit those high notes.
Yes. So we've got one lot of students who finds it hard and sometimes just can't physically get out there, and may cause them to drop the subject, which is really sad. But that happens. And you've got others who get out there and their mind is stopping them from giving their best. performance, their mind and their body.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
where do we start as
Mm-hmm.
what we should do about this, both as the student but also as the supporting people around them?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think?
Yep. I think the first step would be to learn about the anxiety that that student is struggling with. So sometimes it might be helpful to see to talk about it with either parent or whoever's looking after them, the guardian, about what it is, that fear that they have. Talk about it maybe with their teacher, their instrument or voice coach, or the school counsellor or psychologist. Hopefully will be able to provide some assistance with that. Or if the school psych counsellor isn't able to provide that assistance, then seeking help outside of school for a few sessions. I don't think that it's unless it's something that a student's been struggling with for a very long time. If it's just around this performance, they might not need a huge number of sessions. But it's finding out what it is that you're scared of. Sometimes can help, and sometimes it's as simple as, I'm not going to perform. I can't do this. I'm not going to hit those high notes, or I'm going to forget my line, or my voice is going to fail on me, or I'm going to forget the movements, or forget the words, or whatever. Or with some of the woodwinds with the reed instruments, it's going to squeak, which is not all the strings, whatever. So I think then it's about, once you've got that, then it's about recognizing what your anxiety symptoms are, because everybody's anxiety symptoms, even though there's this range of symptoms that are expected and normal, it's knowing what your symptoms are. Because some people will feel sick and can't eat, and some people don't have that problem. And so it's about recognizing what are your specific symptoms, and recognizing what the first sign is that you're anxious. So sometimes it might be waking up and having that heaviness in the pit of the stomach, or it might be feeling, having sweaty palms or feeling a bit shaky. So then you go, what do I need to do? So when I work with anybody on anxiety, the first thing I do is look at breathing, because that's what changes first. It's the breathing. And so sometimes it's,
I was going to say, as a parent, and probably as a psych, you get this too.
Yep.
People do not like being told to breathe.
No. because when we say just breathe, people go, but I don't breathing. But actually, it's about learning to notice your breathing. And for singers and those playing instruments, and even those doing drama and dance, knowing when to breathe and how to breathe is actually so important to that learning the instrument anyway. So if you're playing a woodwind or a brass instrument, so you using your breath, or if you're singing, you already know how to breathe effectively, because that's what's part of playing the instrument. And so then it's about starting to notice that breath and learning to train it specifically. So when I tell people about breathing, it's like sometimes suggesting an app can be quite helpful. And actually my favorite one is the Calm app. In the Calm app, there's, I think on the bottom, I think it's more, and you go there and there's a little breathe, a good breathing bubble. So it's a circle and it expands and contracts, and it goes, and the tone changes. So it actually times breathing in, hold, and breathing out. And that's it's the most simple way to learn breathing, because you've got this thing in front of you to count your breath and slow it down. And I think when we start to pay attention, we go, oh, actually, my breath's all up here. So it's all at the chest. It's not at the diaphragm. When we're anxious, it's up here. So when we tell people just breathe, they get frustrated because I already breathe. It's about knowing that when we say it's about breathing, it's about learning the rhythm of our breath. So musicians, it's adagio rather than scherzo or, really fast.
Yeah. So, and an app is something quite simple that someone would be able to have a look at, while they're waiting to go on, even to help calm them. So, I think that's really, really helpful and a quick thing to be able to do. So, it was interesting you touched on, and I'm not sure what you want to talk about next, but you touched on the role that rehearsal and doing enough practice has in reducing our performance anxiety. So I think that's a really important point to note.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that was one of the things that I was not good at. Like, it was supposed to be an hour a day. When I got to the year 12, grade 5A maybe, I didn't do it. But for me, it wasn't I loved playing flute. I loved that, being in the ensemble. I was never going to be a soloist. And it wasn't my absolute passion. I loved it, but it wasn't my passion. I knew I wasn't going to be a musician. So for me, it was I had to push myself to do it. And it was about, well, if I practice, I will perform better. And I know now, because I still cycle and I'm not racing at the moment, but I've got some big events coming up and like long rides. And I know if I don't do my training, when it gets to that, I'll struggle. So sometimes it's about that rehearsal is, what do I want out of this event? What do I want out of this session? So setting mini goals for each practice session. So when you sit down to practice an instrument or stand, or to practice your song, or to go and practice your dance routine or your piece of solo
monologue.
What it's called when you monologue. Yep. It's about, what do I want to get out of this session? So with the monologue, how much do I want to be able to recite without looking at my script? And with a solo performance, I don't know with instruments whether they have to play it by heart or whether they're allowed music in front of them. But how much of it do I want to get through before I make a mistake? Or what is it so sometimes setting a little goal that's achievable. It's always got to be achievable. And sometimes with sections, maybe there's a really difficult section in the music, or maybe there's a difficult part of your choreography or the monologue that you want to really nail. And so you do that bit over and over and over again. But the other thing with rehearsal is, we can perform really well at home in the privacy of our own space, with no one watching us, with no one, probably family listening. But when we sit down to perform in that space, it becomes the level of challenge increases. So one of the things I was a teacher at one point, and I taught psychology. And one of the things I did with my year 12 students a couple of times was to actually sit down with them and do a visualization before the exam. Yeah. So I sat down and got them to, and I talked them through. I knew where the room the exam was. And so I gave them all these cues about talking them through walking into the room, finding their seat, sitting down, looking around the room, knowing where they are in the room, recognizing the space. So what you can do with performing arts students is actually helping them talk through it, having them write it down, describe it down, or them in their own mind knowing where the performance is. So I don't know. I know for my for my flute exam, solo performance, I think was at school. So I knew what room in the school it was going to be in, but I hadn't really been in there. But when I went for the audition at the conservatorium, I had no idea. And I've done it with some of the performers I've worked with. Do you know where you're going to be auditioning for a role? Do you know what it looks like? They don't know exactly what the room looks like. Do they know what the building looks like? Do they know where their holding area is? So it's about that, knowing what the space looks like, imagining themselves in the space. So there's a psychologist that I've linked with on LinkedIn, who is also a concert pianist, and she's a performance coach. She's based in Sydney, I think, maybe Sydney, or I think it's Sydney. But she actually talked about what she does before she has to perform is she rehearses at home in the outfit that she's performing in. So she rehearses the song, the piece of music she's going to play in her outfit that she's going to perform in. Yeah. And so there's something about that rehearsal. So it's not just the visualizing the rehearsal, it's actually rehearsing. And you think about all of those in the theatre. And I've, when I did, school musicals, and when I've done plays in amateur theatre, there was always a dress rehearsal. You could make mistakes in the dress rehearsal. It didn't matter. But there was sometimes an audience, and, sometimes with those, professional productions now, they do have a dress rehearsal with an audience. They're cheaper tickets, but they're more relaxed. The key point is it's a dress rehearsal. So it's exactly the performance in what you're going to perform in, your whole costume, makeup, the whole bit, on the stage that you're performing on. And so they go through it. It's not just a walkthrough, it's a performance. So, so for some of these students, they can't do a full dress rehearsal. But this is what these performers are, practice performances are. That's the dress rehearsal for the exam. But they can actually have a dress rehearsal up here as many times as they want.
And we know so much about how powerful the visualization of what we're doing is. So they can do the dress rehearsal, but also in their mind do the rehearsal of what they're practicing. So if you need to play the piano for an hour a day and you can't, you can practice wherever you're sitting, you practice in your mind, and we know that that's almost as good, and depending on the study can be as good as actually doing it, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
It's interesting. I read some research, I don't know when it was, where they looked at, they had a couple of groups who'd never played piano. They taught them a piece of music, and very simple, once on the piano. And one group went away and rehearsed on a piano or a keyboard. One group went away and rehearsed on a paper one, so they couldn't hear it. And one group went away and imagined they were rehearsing it. Interestingly, the group that imagined it did better in the end. But the imagination, the visualization of doing it is they actually had to imagine it, visualize it in as much detail as they possibly could. So with the sound, imagine them playing it perfectly. So it's that visualization of the hands moving, the visualization of how it feels. So if you're wanting to do one of these dress rehearsals, these practice performances, or even the exam performance, what you're wanting to do is imagine walking into the room. Imagine breathing calmly. Imagine breathing and feeling calm. Imagine that you've nailed your practice. Imagine that you can do this. Imagine the weight of the instrument if you've got an instrument in your hands. Imagine how it feels to hold it where you need to hold it to play it. So, a violin or a flute or a clarinet or a saxophone or whatever it is. Imagine how it sounds to play it without mistakes. Imagine how it feels to open your mouth and sing or deliver your monologue in your costume, moving around, with the arm movements, the acting. Imagine what it feels like to transfer your weight across your feet as you dance. Imagine the music that you're dancing to. So it really is, and imagine how it feels.
Yes, it's a total immersion in that imaginary world, and you're drawing on all those senses. So it's it does rely on that skill, the ability to do that. But once again, it's practice and visualization as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're not going to be able to do it perfectly the first time.
And I think and I think sometimes that needs to start sooner. So it might need to start at the beginning of term 3 as you get there. And sometimes even if you're doing year 11, units 1, 2 performance, then any of those subjects, you can actually start to practice the visualization because it does take time to master that visualization. And it is easier to do it if you've done it before.
Yep. No, that's good advice.
So
So
and I think sometimes it's with parents, it's about the nagging kids to practice their instrument or their voice or their dance or their monologue isn't going to help. Sometimes it's about shifting it to, hey, how good does it feel when you finish your practice? So it's the end result that you shift the direct students to think, their children to think about. How good does it feel when it's done? how good did it feel to nail that little section of, music? How good did it feel to hit that high note?
Yeah. Well, nagging's one of the best weapons we have, but it does tend to not work that effectively. So
Yeah.
anything else is worth a
It's
try.
interesting. Did you, do you listen to the Potential Psychology podcast with Ellen Jackson?
Yeah.
Yes. So she did one last week on motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And she delivered it. She didn't have a guest this time. So it was her talking about motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, it was that intrinsic motivation, the value that we get out of doing something, that and that meaning and that value. So you think about those students who are doing it for the passion. It's that pleasure. It's that shifting your attention to how good does it feel when you sing, when you dance, when you play your instrument? How good does it feel? And then, but the other bit is also noticing that you're about to perform, noticing the anxiety, noticing that you've got an audience, and drawing on that and saying, this helps me be at my peak. I need to breathe calmly so that I can perform, but I can use this to help me perform at my best, because we know that if we're too relaxed, it won't be good. But if we're too stressed, it won't be good either. So there's that balance in between.
Very true. Perhaps you can think of the audience as as a battery. So you're drawing, you're using that energy, to enhance your performance.
Yep.
You like that? Enhance.
Mm-hmm.
Nonie's psychology practice is called enhanced life psychology. So there you go.
Absolutely. So it's all about enhancing people's performance.
Yes, yeah, totally. So we've covered a few points. One thing I know that because we've probably been chatting a while, is when people do stuff up. What do you do when you're out there giving your performance and you realise you've made mistakes? I know in the training you train to keep going, so the idea is you keep going. But how do you stop that from immobilising your performance?
I think that comes in practice as well. So it is about in rehearsing. So when you miss a note, or you sing it high or flat, or you miss a step in your choreography, or you miss a word or miss a line in your monologue, it is about in rehearsal, as when you're practicing, it's about practicing to keep going.
Yes. Yeah.
So it really is about and knowing that sometimes there's that practice of, okay, this is where I stumbled. I'm going to go back and do that section over and over and over again until I don't stumble. But sometimes you do need to practice just plowing on through, because that is part of that performance. And when you know how to deal with those stumbles, those little errors in that effective way, then you can keep going. One of the most amusing things is, if you ever go to the theatre, if you know a play and you go on the final night performance, without fail, especially if it's a comedy, if it's a lighthearted, generally the cast know each other quite well by that point. And one of the things they often like doing is throwing in another line or doing something in an attempt, they're having fun. They've reached the end of the line, and they don't do it in serious productions. But in those lighthearted ones, they might throw something else in, and the skill of the actors to keep going to plow on. You might see a little laugh, or you might see them, struggle to keep going, but they do keep going. And that's that skill. They are challenging each other to stuff up in that situation. But it's that ability that's been rehearsed to just plow through.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's been rehearsed.
Yeah.
So in your visualization process, you don't visualize mistakes. You visualize doing it correctly. But you practice in your practice. You make mistakes in rehearsal because that's what happens. You're learning something. So when you practice, it's about learning to just keep going.
Yeah.
I think that, the other thing I think also is where we focus our attention. So whenever you're doing something, if you focus on it intently, it will get stronger.
Yes.
So this is why we practice a section where we stumbled. We practice it over and over and over again until we get it correct. And then we keep practicing it because it gets stronger. But if we focus on the mistake, if we focus on the anxiety or the fear, man, it gets stronger. And then that's where that focusing on the, then shifting our focus to the anxiety symptoms, they get stronger. So if we can focus on, okay, this is a bit that I stumbled on, but I'm going to keep going because the next note or the next line I know really well and I've rehearsed it. And so it's that shift of focus from, I've made a mistake, I'm going to keep going.
I was thinking as you were saying that too, is in terms of the noticing, is when you actually get out on the stage and whatever you're doing is just to take that moment where you are noticing, you're anchoring yourself. Like here's the floor. Here I am, and really, experience what's going on rather than just trying to stay in a bubble and getting it done as quickly as possible, but to allow yourself to embrace what's actually there and make that connection too. So.
And it's interesting. I think you don't see it with rock bands, but you see it with any solo performer, even singers who are soloists. When you see them walk out on stage, there's a moment of them stopping and just gathering themselves.
Yeah.
So when you see, so there's a video at the moment on LinkedIn of Anastasia Hronis when she's playing at Carnegie Hall, and she sits at the piano. Hands aren't on the piano at all. They're on her lap, and then you can just see that slow breath in and out, and then she lifts her hands to the piano, and then she starts. So, when you watch an orchestra, there's that moment of when the conductor lifts his baton, and there's just almost a collective in-breath and out-breath from the orchestra as they lift their instruments, and then they start. So even, when it's not so much with dancers, because if they're coming on stage to music, then they don't have that. But backstage, actors and dancers, they all have that moment of slow in-breath, out-breath, I'm ready.
Yes.
And it's that also that in your head, it's that I'm ready, I can do this, I've done all this rehearsal. Sometimes it's not about, I can do this, I've got this. It's not that positive thinking. It's that I've done the rehearsal, I've done the prep, I can walk on stage or into the performance space, and I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've covered quite a lot of points here. Maybe we could just quickly,
We have.
would you like to quickly summarize the main points?
Okay. So I think knowing your goal, and what you're wanting to get out of it, and out of each rehearsal, is a good place to start. Knowing the fear, nutting out what that fear is and how to neutralize it, or how to let it sit beside you. And that might involve seeking help from a psychologist or a school counsellor, school psych, or your music teacher, dance teacher. Breathing. Yep. So learning how to breathe effectively to calm down, and maybe using an app might be helpful.
Visualization.
Rehearsal.
Yes.
Visualizing in rehearsal, but also rehearsing how you deal with mistakes as well. So actually barreling on through when you've made errors, just keep going. And
the pause before you.
The focus.
Focus, yes.
Yep. Focus of what you want to, choosing your focus of attention, and then that pause, that grounding before you start your performance. And there's examiners will allow for that. They expect students to, they don't want students to walk in and just start going. They'd like to see you stop and get ready, and they go, okay, you're ready, and go. Sometimes they don't say anything, and that's quite disconcerting. But it is about, just taking that space to go, and only needs to be, it's not even half a minute, 30 seconds. It's just take a slow breath. If you need to take 2 or 3 slow breaths, it's just feeling your, stance.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So I'd like to add on, just as a parent, if you notice early on, year 11 perhaps, or even early on year 12, and your child's experience anxiety, this is a really good checklist for you to check their rehearsal, check how they're being taught, check what they're doing when they're sitting down doing their practice. So that's some really good tips and things to look at in there.
I think, I think also for parents, it's about parents asking their child, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? Not saying, I want to help you do this, do that. It's actually asking, I'd really like to help you. What can I do to help?
Yes, that's a very good questions to ask. So I think what we'll do is try and put a couple of the links that we talked about underneath, like the Calm app in particular. I don't know whether you'll be able to link to that LinkedIn video or not with the, have to see about that one. So,
we can put her name, and if anyone's on LinkedIn and they want to go and search for Anastasia, then you probably find it. And in fact, I just noticed this morning that someone has found her and has just shared a whole lot of her videos of her performing not just performing, but playing at home. So she's quite open about showing her videos of herself playing piano.
Okay, so thank you very much, Nonie, for joining us. And obviously,
thank you so
if you're
much
watching this and you
for
want to
having
find
me.
out more, I'll get Nonie to put her link in as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, particularly to do with, you've got some questions around performance anxiety, and we'd just like to touch base maybe with 1 or 2 sessions on this specific topic. So that would be great.
Absolutely. More than happy.
All right. Thanks, Nonie.
Thanks so much, Kim. Have a nice day.